The next couple of questions grouped together come from something that I think created a lot of buzz that you said in the debates. And it's about climate change, and specifically its link to terror and terrorism. Jonathan Amon, freshman in the business school from Port Orange, Florida, and Bryce Couch, a freshman in the School of Foreign Service from Texas, both ask very similar questions about, can you elaborate on the link between the two, and what's your plan to address both?
Absolutely. Look, obviously, as I hope I made clear this afternoon, organizations like ISIS, terrorist organizations, are a major threat. They have got to be destroyed. But if you look into the future, this is not Bernie Sanders. This is the CIA, this is the Defense Department, this is countries all over the world. This is what they are saying. If we do not get our act together, if there is more drought around the world, if there is more flooding, if there are more extreme weather disturbances, if sea levels continue to rise and flood coastal regions, there will be a massive displacement of people. People need water. People need land to grow their crops. And if they do not have that land and water, they're going to migrate. And they're going to be in competition with other peoples for limited natural resources. And when that happens, according to the CIA, according to our own Defense Department, that lays the groundwork for international conflict. So in my view, it is not debatable. Of course, climate change is a major inducement to international conflict and also to terrorism. For example, right now, in Syria, as a result of a sustained drought, people have left the rural areas, flooded into the cities, causing more instability and becoming people who could succumb to extremist propaganda. Massive instability in Syria. So what we have to do, and by the way, you know, when I was your age, the challenge of my generation was civil rights. And all over this country, and I was involved when I was at the University of Chicago, but young people stood up and they said, you know what? We're going to end segregation in America. And those of us who were in northern schools helped out financially. Our brothers and sisters fighting in the South who were getting their heads busted open. And we did what we could where we were. My guess, among many other issues that are out there, one of your great challenges today, continue the fight against racism and sexism and homophobia. But also understand that we are fighting for the future of the planet. And if we do not move aggressively, I'm on the Energy Committee in the Senate and the Environmental Committee. I've talked to scientists all over the world. And what they are telling us is we have a small window of opportunity to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel into energy efficiency and sustainable energy. We need to take on the fossil fuel industry who are looking at short-term profits ahead of the future of this planet. And I hope you will be involved in that effort to transform our energy system.
Senator, I know you have to leave momentarily, and so I want to close with one last grouping here, and I think it's an important one because it gets very much at the whole notion of why our institute exists, and one of the big points you brought up at the conclusion of your remarks, and that's how do we get this done? Ari Shapiro, a sophomore in the School of Foreign Service, says asked with a Republican majority in both houses, would you be willing to compromise some of your ideals to get your most important plans passed? And Kumail Aslam, a freshman from San Francisco, writes, my question is, how do you plan on implementing your social programs given the immense opposition in Congress?
Okay, great questions. Look, when you are in Congress, by definition, you compromise every day. And you all should know that when I was in the House of Representatives, I was there for 16 years, on certain years, I ended up getting more amendments passed on the floor of the House than any other member of Congress. Because when there was an issue out there that I could work with Republicans on, and they were in the majority, we put together a pretty good coalition. Just 2 years ago, I worked as chairman of the U.S. Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs. I work with people like Republicans like John McCain in the Senate and people like Congressman Jeff Miller over in the House, who's chairman of the Veterans Committee there, to put together the most comprehensive veterans health care bill passed in recent memory. So yes, I can compromise. But here is the point that I want to make. On many of the issues that I have talked about, virtually all of them, these are not radical extremist ideas. I am not coming before the American people and say, look, I am this radical, wild-eyed socialist, crazy ideas, but listen to me, that's not the issue. Look at the issues. We want to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Raising the minimum wage, widely popular. I want to create 13 million jobs by rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. Wildly popular. Pay equity for women workers. Wildly popular. There it is, popular right here, all right. Making public colleges and universities tuition free and lowering student debt. Widely popular. Combating climate change. There are some Republicans who still don't accept it, but most Americans do, all right? Asking the rich to stop paying their fair share of taxes. Vast majority of the Americans think that that's right. So here's my point. The real question is, sure, you've got to compromise, but the really more important point is, why is Congress so far out of touch with where the American people are at? The Republican agenda is, among other things, to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid and give huge tax breaks to billionaires and to ignore the planetary crisis of climate change. How many people believe in that agenda? I don't know, 5%, 10%. Surely a very small minority of people. So when I talk about the political revolution, when I talk about transforming American politics, what I am talking about is bringing in
out of the labor force. We have 50 million people in poverty. We have 43 million, and now it's actually going to be probably closer to 50 million people on food stamps. And I'll tell you what, if we had a real, hello. You know, it's amazing. I mentioned food stamps, and that guy who's seriously overweight went crazy. He went crazy. Amazing. Amazing. That's an amazing sight. You know, the
voices of millions and millions of people who have given up on the political process, to have their views and their needs being heard by Congress. When that happens, everything that I talked about will be passed. If that does not happen, virtually nothing will be passed. So what this campaign, from my perspective, is about, and I say this in every speech that I give, it's not just electing Bernie Sanders to be president. I surely would appreciate your support. But, very honestly, it is much more than that, because no president, not Bernie Sanders or anybody else, can implement the kinds of changes we need in this country unless millions of people begin to stand up and fight back. And I think right here on college campuses all over this country, we're beginning to see that fight back. We're beginning to see that fight back among low-wage workers who are going out into the streets and saying, you know what, we can't make it on $8 or $9 an hour. Raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. We are beginning to see that movement develop. And I hope you will be part of that movement, because if you are, we can, in fact, transform this country. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Breaking tonight in the Kelly File exclusive, we have new reaction from a top GOP presidential candidate after President Obama today suggested he is ready to take a tougher stand against the Islamic State terror group, yet then made a pivot, sort of, to climate change. Listen.
This barbaric terrorist group poses a serious threat to all of us. It cannot be tolerated. It must be destroyed. We cannot and we will not succumb to fear. Next week, I will be joining President Hollande and world leaders in Paris for the Global Climate Conference. What a powerful rebuke to the terrorists it will be.
Joining me now, presidential candidate and Republican senator from Texas, Ted Cruz. Senator, good to see you tonight. So President Obama came out and tried to strike a tougher tone on the subject of ISIS today. What did you make of it?
Well, Megan, it's good to be with you. You know, it's gotten to the point where I don't think Saturday Night Live can even parody this president anymore. A couple of weeks ago, he went overseas and he said he's not interested in America leading. He's not interested in America winning. He doesn't have time for that. And now he's saying what a powerful rebuke it is to ISIS that he's going to a global warming summit.
Well, in Paris.
I mean, how out of touch.
In Paris.
And yes, but his focus, listen, President Obama and John Kerry have both said that they think essentially your SUV in the driveway is a greater threat to our security than is ISIS, than is a nuclear Iran, and it makes no sense whatsoever. You know what would be a real rebuke to ISIS? When we kill the terrorist before they carry out another terror attack here at home, murdering innocent Americans.
When you listen to him, he said today this is a barbarous group, that they're a serious threat, that they must be destroyed. Do you think this was in reaction to the criticism he received over his initial reaction to the Paris attacks, or do you take him at his word on what he said today?
Well, look, he's finally using the adjectives for ISIS that he usually reserves for Republicans and for conservatives, so I guess that's a step in the right direction. But at the end of the day, he still refuses to utter the words radical Islamic terrorism. He still has no strategy for defeating ISIS, and he still wants to bring to America tens of thousands of Syrian Muslim refugees, even after his own FBI director admitted this administration cannot vet the refugees to ensure they're not ISIS terrorists. That doesn't make any sense.
Let me shift gears with you now to the politics, because there's been an extraordinary shift in the presidential race. You may be familiar with it. And it inures to your benefit. I mean, all the headlines today were about Ted Cruz and cruise control in Iowa. Take a look at the numbers for the viewers who haven't seen it. Ted Cruz is now basically tied for first. He's behind Donald Trump by 2 points, but man, you're right there in the margin of error in Iowa, besting Carson and the rest of the field by at least 5 points. What do you make of it? What do you attribute your surge?
Well, listen, the energy and momentum we're seeing both in Iowa and nationally are nothing short of breathtaking, and this is a continuation of what has been happening.
Let's bring in Mr. Trump. Right now, he joins us on the phone. You just heard those poll results, Donald Trump. Also, a new poll out in New Hampshire showing you holding the lead. Is the nomination now yours to lose?
I don't know. I don't think about it. I think about the date. All of a sudden, February 1st comes. That's Iowa, and then we have New Hampshire. We're doing great in both those places. We're doing great all over the country. I think I'm leading every state, but we're doing really well. I was happy to hear your numbers, but I'm not that surprised. And we'll see what happens. I mean, people are tired. They're sick and tired of incompetence. They're sick and tired of stupid people leading them. The deals they make, whether it's trade or whether it's dealing with ISIS, everything is wrong. They don't know what they're doing. I was after the oil. I said, attack the oil. I've been telling you that, George, for 2 years. Yeah. Attack the oil. They didn't do it. ISIS became wealthy with the oil. Now they're starting to attack the oil. Nobody mentions it was me.
You did stir up a controversy with those comments over the database. Let's try to clear that up. Are you unequivocally now ruling out a database on all Muslims?
No, not at all. I want a database for the refugees that if they come into the country, we have no idea who these people are. When the Syrian refugees are going to start pouring into this country, we don't know if they're ISIS. We don't know if it's a Trojan horse. And I definitely want a database and other checks and balances. We want to go with watch lists. We want to go with databases. And we have no choice. We have no idea who's being sent in here. This could be the great Trojan. It's probably not, but it could be the great Trojan horse of all time.
And where
they come in. When I look at those migration, when I look at the migration and the lines, and I see all strong, very powerful-looking men. They're men. And I see very few women. I see very few children. There's something strange going on. And if you look at what's happening in Europe, a lot of bad things are happening in Europe. Just ask the folks that live in Germany, George. A lot of bad things are happening. So
the statistics
we want to be smart. We want to, hey, George, we want to be vigilant. We have to be vigilant. And we have to call is radical. You know, we have to just say it's radical Islamic terrorism, and that's what it is. And we have a president that won't even issue the term. But when these Syrians come in, or wherever they are, because we're not even sure that they're coming in from Syria, if they're going to come in, we have to be very, very vigilant. And database would be fine for them, and watch list is fine. We have to watch and see what we're doing. They should not come in, by the way. They should not be allowed in.
Just for the record, though, the statistics do show the majority of the refugees coming in are women and children. You've also told Yahoo News that we have to be doing things that were unthinkable a year ago. I want to get into what you had in mind. For example, do you think we should bring back enhanced interrogation like waterboarding?
Well, we have to be strong. You know, they don't use waterboarding over there. They use chopping off people's heads. They use drowning people. I don't know if you've seen with the cages where they put people in cages and they drown them in the ocean and then they lift out the cage. And we're talking about waterboarding.
So you'd bring back waterboarding?
We have to. I would bring it back. Yes, I would bring it back. I think waterboarding is peanuts compared to what they do to us. What they're doing to us, what they did to James Foley when they chopped off his head, that's a whole different level. And I would absolutely bring back interrogation and strong interrogation.
You've also said we have to consider closing mosques. Jeb Bush called that a sign of weakness.
Well, Jeb Bush is a weak person, and that's been defined very strongly. I mean, Jeb is a weak person who is I call him a low-energy person. That's what he is. I mean, you call him anything you want. But Jeb is a person that will not solve a problem like this. You have very, very tough people that you're dealing with. They only understand strength. They don't understand weakness. Somebody like Jeb and others that are running against me. And by the way, Hillary is another one. I mean, Hillary is a person who doesn't have the strength or the stamina, in my opinion, to be president. She doesn't have strength or stamina. She's not a strong enough person to be president.
But what would be your criteria for closing a mosque?
We're dealing with very, very strong people, and you need strength and you need stamina.
I get that, but I want to get the details, though. What would be your criteria for closing a mosque, and how does that square with the First Amendment? You said your top priority would be to preserve and protect our religious liberty. Is that only for Christians? What are your criteria for closing a mosque?
Well, I don't want to close mosques. I want to surveil mosques. I want mosques surveilled. We were doing it in New York City for a while until the worst mayor that New York City has ever had got elected, de Blasio, which was a fluke. And, well, I would do certainly there are certain hot spots, and everybody knows they're hot spots. And let me tell you, the people that aren't involved in those mosques, they know who the bad ones are, and they know who the good ones are, but they don't talk. And we have to surveil the mosques. And we were doing it. We were doing it recently until de Blasio closed them up in New York City. We were doing it recently. We have to surveil the mosques. And big material and good material, from what I understood from a very good source, was coming out of those mosques. We were learning a lot, and they were stopping problems and potential problems by learning what was happening. Hey, look, I don't want to close up mosques, but things have to happen where you have got to use strong measures, or you're going to see buildings coming down all over New York City and elsewhere.
You've also talked about you want to keep the terror watch list, but under current law, individuals on the terror watch list and the no-fly list have been allowed to buy guns and explosives. Are you okay with that?
We have to have a watch list, and if that watch list has somebody that's, we have the laws right now. We have the laws already on the books as far as Second Amendment and guns. And as you know, I'm a really big proponent of the Second Amendment. I'll give you an example. If in Paris, some of those people, if some of those people had guns, you wouldn't have had the horror show that you had.
But why should someone on the watch list be able to have a gun?
No. If people are on a watch list or people are sick, this is already covered in the legislation that we already have, George. It's already fully covered.
No, but under current law, people on the watch list are allowed to buy guns.
Listen, George, if we have an enemy of state, I don't want to give him anything. I want to have him in jail. That's what I want. I want to have him in jail. But if those people in Paris had guns in that room, it would have been a shootout, and very few people would have been hurt by comparison to the number that were hurt.
But yes or
I'll tell you who would have been hurt. The bad guys would have, because they were the only ones that had the guns.
Mr. Trump, yes or no, should someone on the terror watch list be allowed to buy a gun?
If somebody is on a watch list and an enemy of state, and we know it's an enemy of state, I would keep them away, absolutely.
You know, you raised some eyebrows yesterday with comments you made at your latest rally. I want to show them relating to 9/11.
Hey, I watched when the World Trade Center came tumbling down. And I watched in Jersey City, New Jersey, where thousands and thousands of people were cheering as that building was coming down. Thousands of people were cheering.
You know, the police say that didn't happen at all. Those rumors have been on the internet for some time. So did you misspeak
It did
yesterday?
happen. I saw it. It was
you
on
saw
television.
that with your own eyes?
George,
Police
it
say
did
it didn't
happen. There were
happen.
people that were cheering in the other side of New Jersey where you have large Arab populations. They were cheering as the World Trade Center came down. I know it might be not politically correct for you to talk about it, but there were people cheering as that building came down, as those buildings came down. And that tells you something. It was well covered at the time, George. Now, I know they don't like to talk about it, but it was well covered at the time. There were people over in New Jersey that were watching it, a heavy Arab population that were cheering as the buildings came down. Not good.
As I said, the police have said it didn't happen. What I want to move on right now, a chorus of rivals have pounced on your database comments, and a super PAC supporting John Kasich launched this ad against you.
On-the-job training for president does not work. Benghazi, beheadings, Paris. Our lives depend on a commander-in-chief with experience who understands the world.
Clear implication is that you don't. What's your response to that ad?
John Kasich is going nowhere. He was at the head of Lehman. He was one of the top people at Lehman when Lehman Brothers almost took down the world. He's going nowhere. Let him do his ads. Anybody that does an ad against me, it'll be hit by 10 times, and that's the story. And, you know, people would like to do. Look, they want to do it because I'm leading. I mean, you just came out with a poll that says I'm leading, but everyone else is coming out with polls saying I'm leading because people are sick and tired of stupid and incompetent people leading our nation. We have incompetent people. When President Obama stands up and says ISIS is contained, and then a few hours later you have one of the most horrible attacks where hundreds of people are killed, and you have 300 people laying in the hospital, many of them dying, they'll be added to the list of the people killed. And we have no idea. And then he wants to take in people that have no documentation, no paperwork, no anything. From Syria on the migration, people are going to come pouring in, and the number he wants is much higher than 10,000. I've heard it's 200,000. That's the real number he wants. I've even heard 250,000 people. We have a president that doesn't know what he's doing. We have a president, George, who is totally incompetent.
That number is all refugees, not from Syria. But finally, you know, that super PAC is not alone. Front page story in the Wall Street Journal yesterday talks about GOP operatives planning to launch a guerrilla campaign against Trump. They're saying the Republican establishment is increasingly alarmed by your enduring strength, and that they're going to have the first attempt to unite donors from rival camps into a single anti-Trump force. If that begins to happen, are you going to reconsider an independent run if they come after you to try to take you out?
Well, we'll see what happens. It'll be very interesting, but I'm leading every poll by a lot. It's not even a little bit anymore. It's a lot, and I resonate with the people. I had 10,000 people yesterday. Every place I go, if I have crowds smaller than 10,000, it's like a small crowd for me. Nobody else can get 200. I mean, Jeb Bush and these guys, Kasich goes out, he speaks. If he gets 20 people in a room, it's a lot of people. Nobody else gets anybody. I get crowds, and you know it, you cover it. I get crowds of 6,000, 10,000, 20,000. I had a 35,000
But you're
crowd
open
in
to an
Alabama.
independent run?
Well, I'm going to have to see what happens. I will see what happens. I have to be treated fairly. You know, when I did this, I said, I have to be treated fairly. If I'm treated fairly, I'm fine. All I want to do is a level playing field. And I think people are surprised that, you know, they're politicians and They've been doing this stuff all their lives. I haven't. I've been a job producer. I've done great, things. I've done fabulous developments all over the world, and I've made a lot of money, and that's the kind of thinking we need in office. That's the kind of thinking we need in Washington, and that's why people are resonating with me. And, they know there's a great level of competence. We have a great level of incompetence right now in Washington, and frankly, we have a lot of incompetent politicians running for office, and they can't understand, how come an outsider can be doing so well within the party. I used to be, George, the fair-haired boy. When I was a contributor, I know more about contributions than anybody. I contributed at the top of the line. But now all of a sudden, I'm somebody that's a little bit, they're a little bit, I guess they can't understand what's happening. But what's happening is very simple. People want competence now. They're tired of incompetent people. It's as simple as that.
Mr. Trump, thanks for your time this morning.
Happening steadily after the third debate, after the fourth debate, which is that we're seeing conservatives unite behind our campaign. What Washington has always wanted is to divide conservatives, to have us splintered, a chunk of conservatives here, a chunk of evangelicals, a chunk of libertarians, a chunk of Tea Party folks. It's a mistake we've made over and over and over again, whether it was Bob Dole or John McCain or Mitt Romney. Every time we listen to the voice of run to the middle, we get clobbered. It doesn't work. They're all good, honorable men, but what they did didn't work. And I think what Republican primary voters are looking for is the strongest proven conservative, someone who's a consistent conservative, someone who's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and also someone who can unite all three legs of the Republican stool that can
are you in trouble now on the
fiscal
NSA
conservatives,
vote?
social conservatives, and national security conservatives.
You voted to undo the NSA, which is now you're getting hit by some on the right. But you're the mainstream moderate guy. They say you voted to undo the NSA protection.
Now let's
and you should have moved to the right.
Let's speak the truth. I'm not getting hit by anyone on the right. I'm getting hit by a PAC. Yes, by a PAC supporting Marco Rubio.
Our leaders must keep America safe. But when Ted Cruz had the chance to fight Barack Obama's dangerously weak anti-terror policies, he didn't.
Marco Rubio's PAC is doing this because they desperately want to change the discussion from his longtime support of President Obama's massive amnesty plan. This PAC ad by Rubio's supporter, where they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, listen, what it really is, Megan, is it's a sign of desperation. They want to try to change the topic because I think Marco's campaign is determined that his longtime support of Chuck Schumer and Barack Obama's amnesty plan, particularly making it easier to bring Syrian Muslim refugees into this country, that they're now worried about it politically, so they want to change it with a false attack act.
And the latest polls show the public of 67% there against letting the refugees in. Senator Ted Cruz, it's always great talking to you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Megan. It's great to be with you.